So while much of D.C. has been focused on the potential impeachment and removal of President Trump, Senator Bernie Sanders has turned his attention to the Senate Budget Committee, of which he will be the chair. New York Times reports that Sanders has been creating a new stimulus package that could include, quote, $1,400 in direct payments for adults and children on top of that $600 that Congress just passed, and an emergency universal health care program so that anyone can get medical treatment during the pandemic, whether they currently have insurance or not.
So joining us now to discuss, editor-in-chief at The Real News and host of the Working People podcast, Max Alvarez, and Capitol Hill reporter at The Daily Caller, Henry Rogers. Max, curious for your input here just around Senator Sanders and how he's been working with Joe Biden, and also just how you expect that senator to act as chairman of the very powerful Senate Budget Committee now that Democrats have control.
I have a whisper of hope that every ounce of my being is telling me to to shut down. because of everything that I've seen in the Democratic Party, everything that we saw over the Democratic primaries and yada yada yada. I guess my initial hesitation to kind of explain it for people watching, right, is what I'm wary of is that this kind of arrangement gives Joe Biden especially kind of the ability to have his cake and eat it too, right? Mm-hmm. Now that the kind of legislative reign of terror of Mitch McConnell can be effectively put to an end, that now that the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the White House, they don't have the kind of standard roadblock that they can blame for all the times that they can't pass through the legislation that they tell voters that they want to pass through. Now they actually have the possibility to do that. Question is, are they going to? And then you kind of start recalling that every time Democrats have been in similar situations, suddenly we start hearing a lot about, sorry, I can't swear, but you start hearing about people like Joe Manchin, right? I mean, who is kind of the party's built-in escape hatch to prevent the party from actually doing what it's promised voters it would do, right? And so Biden gets to say that he wants $2,000 stimulus checks. Joe Manchin gets to say, no, I'm a Democrat in a red state, so I don't want that. So thus, we're not going to do it, or we're going to get some sort of means-tested, piece of crap at the end of it. And I really am trying to give some hope to Bernie Sanders, who has said very adamantly that he is going to approach this aggressively. And I already know that Bernie, knows what people are going through. My folks just got COVID, and the past 2 weeks have been hell with me worrying. My sister and my mom spent hours trying to get hold of a single doctor or a single insurance rep. What Bernie is trying to do, what he's trying to do with building in kind of emergency healthcare is really essential. The ultimately baffling thing is just that this is even a conversation right now. I don't think the people on the Hill recognize that the pandemic has only gotten worse. People are only getting sicker and more people are dying. This should not even be a discussion.
Yeah. Henry, let me go to you on this. Putting Max's well-warranted skepticism and cynicism aside, let's say the Democrats get the $2,000 checks and an emergency, medical insurance program that covers everyone, and they do a decent job with vaccine rollout. This really puts Republicans in a bind. All of those things are dramatically popular. How are Republicans going to respond to that state of affairs?
It's going to be tough, Crystal. I remember last week, I think I was on the show, and we were talking about how lovely it was to see Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley getting along on the Senate floor. Well, the problem with that is now Josh Hawley is the most hated person in the Senate, or one of the most hated people in the Senate. And he won't be able to get anything done. Nobody will ever get on a bill with Josh Hawley, at least for the next couple of years. And that's going to be a problem. So Republicans are going to have to be, playing this very carefully. I think, obviously, I've been saying this for a while. We need this $2,000 stimulus check. We need to get the people this relief. And I think it's a disaster that politicians will hold it up. But now that Joe Biden will have, like we said, the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there shouldn't be a problem to get this through. I think this should happen, and this should happen fast.
Well, this is the real question, Henry. I talked about this a lot in my radar today, which is that I think Joe Biden is going to be one of the most popular presidents in my lifetime, simply by not doing a terrible job with coronavirus vaccines and by passing $2,000 stimulus checks, which default will lead to a roaring economy. And I mean, right now, there just seems to be, as you said, there's a huge split within the Republican Party. Do you think that the oppositional tactics that they used under Obama are going to work this time around, or are the circumstances just too different?
I think it's just too different. I think the country is too divided. I think things are literally on fire right now. There's not really a good enough reason right now for Republicans to hold out when they had their savior, President Trump, saying that they should get, $2,000 checks passed, and a bunch of other Republicans saying the same thing. And then you have your budget hawks who refuse to even consider $1,000, $1,600. So I think it's going to be a problem. I think, the Democrats are going to be hitting Republicans hard on this on Capitol Hill. I think Joe Biden will be hitting Republicans hard on this from the White House. And I do think that unless this is passed, unless these checks are passed and stimulus is given to the American people, we're going to see a real problem for the Republican Party, a big problem.
Yeah,
right.
Well, and here's the thing, too. Last time around with the Obama backlash, the Tea Party, they were all ideologically aligned. They were all singing the same tune about, too much spending and too much government. That talking point has kind of been broken down over the past year of the pandemic with the amount of money that's already been spent. I think it's going to be hard to go back to exactly that same playbook. So, Max, weigh in on that. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on if we are able to achieve, and by the way, we should say, reporting is that Joe Biden is less interested in the emergency universal health care provision than some other parts of the stimulus that are being talked about. But let's play in the land of maybe this happens. How significant is that? Getting people, everybody, even if it's for a temporary time, access to health care. How important is that in terms of steps down the road to actually having a single payer system in place?
I think it's hugely significant. I think it's a really excellent question, right? Because it's something that I think that a lot of labor scholars and organizers talk about in very serious terms, because that experience is hugely politically significant, right? Because I was just actually interviewing a really great and brilliant labor scholar, Rebecca Given at Rutgers University, and she made this point, right? That over the course of the past few years, the quote unquote wave of teachers strikes, Jane McAlevey doesn't want us to call it a wave, but the teachers strikes that happened in the past couple years, one of the main significant parts of that is that people in this country experienced a strike. They experienced their schools being shut down because their kids couldn't go to school or their neighbors were on strike. And that's something that we hadn't had in a long time. And it affected a lot of people. And that does a lot of work to break past kind of the barrier of rhetoric that we always get caught up in when we're talking about these things in the abstract. When you actually go through it, when you experience the solidarity of the picket line, it does change you, right? And in the same way, the experience of people getting a check from the government in June, right? That's not something people are going to forget. They know that it is now possible, right? They know now more than ever that it's not just the rhetoric of politicians saying, oh, we can't do that. Oh, something blah, 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 the deficit, right? People are like, no, it was in my bank account. I've seen that you can do it. I've seen that you give even bigger tax breaks for the rich and yada, yada, yada. I do think that does kind of play a role in changing kind of people's psyche, or at least their understanding of what is politically possible. And that's not something to kind of be discounted. But I guess to answer the first question, right? I mean, if I were, a Republican, I would be jumping on this kind of stimulus bill yesterday, right? Because, Crystal, you were asking in the last segment, right? You were talking about your conversation with Bhaskar Sankara about how to build a working class coalition, including kind of appealing to working class people who voted for Trump, right? I think the one of the really essential kind of divides there, and I've talked about this, I think the last time that I came on the show, right, was that Democrats have shown time and again that they do not want to empower the rank and file, right? Their record speaks for itself there, right? Republicans, especially through Trump, they have offered working people at least an illusion of power, a form of cultural power that they can have over their neighbors and people online that they hate, right? There is a cultural sense of power that they can hold over other people through the Republican Party. And if Republicans want to kind of retain that sort of appeal, then, if they throw some more kind of stimulus checks on top of that, they'll be way ahead of the Democrats in terms of at least gesturing towards empowering the rank and file of this country.
Yeah, that's a really, really excellent point. Guys, thank you so much for your analysis. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, coming up, host of the Bad Faith podcast, Brianna Joy Gray. She's going to talk about why progressives need to push Joe Biden to try and cancel student debt. That's when Rising continues.